me to hear all my
Okay, great. All right, welcome everybody. We got a good crowd tonight. Thanks for coming out. This is our monthly Coastal Georgia Audubon speaker series, and we love having these at the college, getting students out, getting community members out. And we do these in the fall months, and then we get into spring months. So if you enjoy them, we hope that you'll keep on coming. My name is Ben Carswell. Coastal Georgia Audubon is an all volunteer-led organization, so I'm the volunteer president for the organization. Sarah is our volunteer vice president, or has been. This may be her last meeting. We're very sad that Sarah is moving to Virginia, but we've been very, very lucky to have her help us with everything. So Sarah, thank you. Thank you for all you've done for Coastal Georgia.
Yeah. We have someone from North Carolina in the chat. Woo!
All right. All right. We're pulling in folks from all over. And yeah, this is being hosted online as well. So welcome.
Oh. Not my husband, no.
Well, hey, thanks for I was gonna say, always like to open these with just inviting people to share recent experiences with birds, especially, or just wildlife in general. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, don't be, you know, daunted by folks in the room that might be real serious birders. So how about it? Anybody seen a cool bird lately? Anybody had a cool wildlife or nature experience lately that you want to share? Oh yeah.
On Jekyll 2 weeks ago, like two Fridays ago, it was like fallout almost with the fog. And if you were there at sunrise, all the palm warblers are here, and they were like falling out of the sky. So it was really cool. Hundreds of palm warblers. I was standing on the south end, and they were just everywhere. So it's really cool.
Wow.
Fall is definitely here because the palm warblers and the yellow ruffs are here. But
they are here.
It was really awesome.
Yeah, I've had a lot of red starts flittering around my backyard. Anybody else? Yeah.
I went out patrolling the other day with the conservation team, looking at the boats on Jekyll Island. Couldn't find them, so we went patrolling, and then of course it's sitting on top of the water tower looking for something.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I've seen the eagle up there on top of the water tower before. So are you working with the conservation team on Jekyll?
Just shadowing. I work for a mini golf investment.
Oh, okay, yeah. Great. I used to work with them too. Cool. Anybody else?
So over in Jekyll Island, I was out in the backyard. I looked out, and there's a heron in the backyard.
A great egret.
It was a big bird.
Yeah. Anyways, we thought he grabbed a lizard, but when I zoomed in on it, the baby jumped it.
Whoa!
I couldn't tell whether it's called you or but the little guy was like 6 inches long, and they went to a little pool.
Yeah.
But the heron won.
Yeah.
Quite a spectacular naturalistic encounter.
Yeah, the great egrets seem to have quite a wide range of dietary options. You'll see them a lot on roadsides, kind of pulling stuff out of the grass. They seem to like reptiles a lot, skinks. I've seen a picture of one swallowing a rough green snake before.
So I have to tell you, the reason they're there all the time. We planted a bunch of mule grass because we had a whole mule grass thing called plants on Jekyll. So we have more mule grass on our yard than probably anybody.
Yeah.
And they love it. And
yeah.
They take those snakes like this big and the gator.
Wow. Was the gator in your yard? The big gator?
Yeah.
Huh. That's unusual.
Yeah.
It was just a little guy like that?
Probably 6 inches or so, but he eluded the heron several times, and then by the time he flipped him up and got him by the head, it was all over.
That is unusual.
Where was Mom?
Yes, sir.
Just to think that the eagle doesn't always win. I live on a lake on St. Simon's Island, and I caught an 8-foot gator
he had a giant eagle in the mouth. His eyes started, and it took him an hour. And he had his mouth tapped on his instant view, and he didn't do anything for about an hour until he just started to bubble.
Oh, wow, that's something. Anybody else?
He's up on my patio a couple weeks.
It's supposed to be so gruesome.
One is Halloween, right? Got the Halloween candy. You got one?
Mine's not as cool as a baby alligator, but when I was at my apartment today and I was leaving, there was about like 4 or 5. I think they're like the red cardinals.
Mhm.
They were just flying like in the trees all.
Oh, wow.
They were all like grouped together.
Oh, they're beautiful birds. And we kind of take them for granted because we see them so often, but it's like sometimes somebody will come from another part of the world and they're really excited about cardinals. Well, I'll emphasize the sweetgrass more. So if you don't live on Jekyll like some of us do, students, you guys can come over to Jekyll for free. And the sweetgrass or muley grass, right, as it's also called, is blooming right now. It's a beautiful, feathery purplish pink grasses, and it's all over the beachfront on Jekyll. There's a wildlife corridor being restored over there right now that's going to have a lot of it. But it's a really valuable habitat this time of year. All right. Well, we want to mention some of our upcoming events. We're kind of getting towards the second half of our fall migration season and our field trips and birding walks, but still have some coming up, including this Saturday out Altamaha Wildlife Management Area, and then following week at Cannons Point Preserve. Our Little St. Simon's members only trip is full. Looking forward to that for those who are going to be able to join us. And next month, we've got, I mentioned the Wildlife Corridor project on Jekyll. We had Jekyll Island Authority last season speak to us about that. And then at our speaker series meeting next month, we're going to have Lauren Gingerella, who's a PhD student who's helping with some of the bird monitoring associated with that project. And then we'll have a sparrow walk. So, Bob Sattlemeyer, do you have anything to add about, where are you? There you are.
Yes, that's all good. That's all. Okay. Anybody has any questions about how to get them on any of these places?
Yeah.
Happy to.
Come join us. All right. Well, with that, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Ashby Worley. Ashby and I have our careers have kind of progressed through the same period of time. We've always kind of been peers in and out of this area. And Ashby's always been somebody that's professionally inspiring to me, inspires me to strive harder myself. So excited that she can be here to speak with you tonight. Ashby is the Coastal Climate Adaptation Director for Nature Conservancy in Georgia. She did her undergraduate degree in environmental science from Mercer, and then went on to get a master's in environmental science, specializing in wetland studies from LSU, and has been working as a coastal scientist in this area for about 15 or so years, give or take, and has done a lot of awesome work in that time, including some work with UGA, with Coastal Resources Division at DNR, and did a great job with Satilla Riverkeeper before joining the Nature Conservancy. So I'm excited that today she can share with you this brand new, hot off the press tree resiliency plan for the city of Brunswick. And we have to give extra thanks to Ashby because this is the second time she's given this presentation today. We were both at the Georgia Resiliency Conference. Has been the past couple of days over on Jekyll. But really excited about this plan for the city of Brunswick, really forward looking for Brunswick, and Nature Conservancy has championed this. But if you think about, living in the city, enjoying wildlife in the city, you're probably not going to go birding in a part of town that has no trees. And so, you know, the tree canopy is an important, a really important part of bird habitat and urban wildlife habitat in general. So we're excited for City of Brunswick to be advancing this plan and excited to learn more about it.
Thanks.
Ashby.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully the owls can hear me from here, or should I stand on that side? Okay. I can hear you. Okay, good, good. So there's no less enthusiasm for me to speak about this again, because like, I'm very excited about it, but I apologize if my brain is a little fuzzy from today's conferences and meetings and whatnot. So, you know, speak up if I state anything incorrectly, that sort of thing. But yes, I've been with the Nature Conservancy about 10 years. I'm based here in Brunswick. I live here in Brunswick. Most of my work is in the coastal area, a lot of times Glynn County and Camden County, even though we do work across the coast. My colleague, Chrissy Lambert, many of y'all probably know Chrissy, works in oceans and coasts as well, oyster reefs and whatnot. So I'm going to speak to you about a new project that we actually just completed, but I say completed, really just moving into implementation. The plan is done, but now the work needs to start. And let me say a few things about the Nature Conservancy. If you're not familiar with us, we're an international, global nonprofit organization that's been around for many decades. Started here in Georgia, I think it was in the 60s, with the protection of Egg and Wolf Islands off of the Omaha. Most well known for our land protection efforts through the decades, but certainly through the years, we've focused on various things like climate change, freshwater, oceans, oysters, prescribed fire on various habitats. So we branch in a lot of different directions, but our roots really are in that land protection. And we still do some of that with Ceylon and Montana and different places like that along our coast. And TNC, we have some pretty big goals. These are what we call our 2030 goals. This is certainly not to be done only by TNC. This is our goals across the globe by 2030. So it's, you know, from reducing, from sequestering carbon to protecting acres, to protecting wetlands and stream miles. But I want to bring your attention to the second one down on the left, resilient ecosystems for a flourishing world. That's really where our concept of nature-based solutions for climate change come in. So really, how can we protect nature and restore nature and ensure nature is around in the future to help us, especially on the coast, adapt to sea level rise, and heat and all these climate impacts that we're going to be seeing in the future. So the goal here is 100 million people benefiting from these nature-based solutions. So we want to not just protect nature for nature's sake, but protect it for people as well, so that they're benefiting from those ecosystems. So when we're talking about climate change, I'm sure you feel the impacts or see some impacts in your neighborhoods or in your life. The picture here on the right, anyone know or guess where that is? Recognize. Gas station in Gloucester. Yeah, and that could be, of course, it's flooded here. It could be from many different sources. It could be a tide flooding on a sunny day. It could be rain flooding. It could be a storm surge. And that could be also, and will likely be what that area looks like in the future with sea level rise. So certainly our coastline has flooding challenges, but we're also experiencing more and more heat. And you all live here on the coast. We've had some pretty hot summers, record-breaking summers, but we're predicted in our area to have 20 to 30 more days above 95 degrees by the year 2050 compared to what we've had in the past. So these areas are continuing to get hotter and hotter. And so our ecosystems and our people are going to have to adapt to that. And actually, when we look at what our area here could look like in the future in terms of climate, there's a neat tool that our contractor was able to find that helps understand if we continue to have these high emissions and don't cut down emissions in the near future, by 2080, we can be expecting to have a similar climate as part of eastern Mexico. So this is important because this dictates the types of plants that live here, the types of trees that will survive or not survive, It's going to become wetter and hotter in our areas, both in the summer and in the wintertime, and potentially translate our ecosystems that we have here from a temperate conifer forest, which is what we are currently designated, to more of a tropical or subtropical moist broadleaf forest area. So these are how ecosystems are going to start changing over time, and we need to adapt, and so will we with it. And as many of you probably know, trees are actually a great way of combating climate change in multiple ways. It can help us adapt and mitigate to those climate impacts. A lot of my work focuses on the flooding aspect and the heat aspect. And so trees can help absorb floodwaters and do that in a great way, from intercepting rainfall, but also absorbing water from the root systems. It can cool communities by providing shade and decreasing temperatures, especially in urban environments. When you look at areas like the city of Brunswick, which is primarily urban, trees are probably one of the greatest nature-based approaches to mitigating climate. But also, those trees help with a lot of health benefits for the community, decrease stress, provide green space, reduces rates of cardiac disease, strokes, improves air quality, provides opportunities for recreation, and also, filters particulates and pollutants. There are multiple benefits, besides the one that y'all are all probably most interested in, biodiversity, right? It provides habitat for our wildlife and various species and migratory species. So we focused on the city of Brunswick for this tree resiliency plan. Many of y'all probably live nearby, so you understand that the city of Brunswick overall is a pretty under-resourced community that is vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and will increasingly be vulnerable in the future. We've lost trees from Hurricane Matthew, Irma, even the freeze, we lost a decent number of trees. And the city, as well as the county and other areas, are increasingly experiencing the pressure of development and redevelopment. So that can lead to the loss of trees because, we have a current tree canopy, but as you're developing new areas, you're losing a lot of that tree canopy. And the city actually identified urban forest preservation in its community-driven plans, which is great. They said in the comp plan they wanted to do things. They said in their hazard mitigation plan that they wanted to do some pretty robust efforts around tree preservation. But ultimately, they lacked the capacity and the funding to implement some of these ideas. So we worked with the city to apply for some funding from actually Wells Fargo Foundation that gave us the grant funding to establish a tree resiliency plan with the city. So we did apply for some public funding, that didn't come through, and ultimately private funding was able to come to the table. And we have a picture here of some of the Wells Fargo Foundation folks planting 4 live oak trees in their Ross Park last Arbor Day. So we know we wanted this to be a community engaged and community driven plan because ultimately this is a community's plan. This is a community in the city of Brunswick. We wanted to make sure it was theirs and had ownership and provided input into it. So we had about a 27-person stakeholder committee that was created, and really we brought that committee together of people that were already involved in tree preservation efforts in the city, things like People Not Beautiful, 100 Miles, UGA Rate Retention, Sea Grant, GIFT, which is School Now Plant the Trees. As many of these folks that we could get in the room that were most interested in tree care and preservation in the city. And we worked with them for about a year with a contractor, the Green Infrastructure Center, who has great expertise in these types of plans to create the plan. I'll walk through some of that in a little bit. We held 2 community workshops in the city of Brunswick. We also sent out a survey to the neighborhood planning assemblies to make sure we were getting some input from the public about the trees, what do they want to see in the tree plan, what are their goals in the city, and also presented this plan as we were going along to the city council as well. So met with them when we got the funding to do it, we met with them midway through, we met with them when it was done, and then ultimately they adopted it earlier this month at their city council as a true Brunswick. So what's in the plan? So I'll start off with, there was a tree canopy analysis conducted. And so this picture on the left is showing in the green that there's about 30% tree canopy coverage across the city of Brunswick. So that kind of lines up with other cities that are about Brunswick's size. I wouldn't say it's great, I wouldn't say it's terrible, it's about mid-range for most cities' size. We also identified potential planting areas. So these are areas within the city that trees can be planted in. It could be public property, it could be private property. And this is important because there have been tree planting efforts in the city, but it's been a bit opportunistic. I wouldn't say haphazard, but just kind of, you know, people want to plant trees or organization wants to plant trees, they don't really know where, they don't really know what kind, you know, where's the best place to do it. And this helps guide us where those trees could or should be planted. And what's nice is we have actually this broken down into other categories, such as broken down by neighborhood, the neighborhood planning assemblies. You can see what's the percent of tree coverage per neighborhood. So if you want to focus on low coverage neighborhoods, you've got some information there. Schools, so the school system properties, and what's the tree coverage on those properties. We even had it by parcel in the city, so it's really detailed information that shows you, you know, is there 0% coverage on that parcel? Is it 100% coverage? And then by census block. Well, we have a lot of data in the city. Now, we have run through several maps here. So if anyone is confused about the map or has questions, feel free to jump in and let me know. So this image, I want to focus your attention to the left side. This is looking at the roads and streets in the city. And it's looking at the percent of tree canopy coverage within 50 feet of the street center line. So the areas in red have very little to no trees within 50 feet of the center line. And why that's important is because those are a lot of times the right-of-ways where cities can plant trees, right? So we understand there's significant routes and pathways that are lacking trees. If all the areas, there's about 30 miles of roads that have the potential to be over 25% canopy if you plant in that potential planting area. So the image on the right is if you were to plant many of these right-of-ways, you can improve the tree coverage along your streets. That kind of helps the city especially, but also other interested parties to know what are the streets and avenues that use street trees. Okay, this is talking more about flood abatement. So I'm going to focus again your attention on the left. This is showing the tree canopy locations that are retaining the greatest stormwater volumes. The darkest green is containing the most stormwater. They're absorbing the most stormwater. What I think is interesting is you see the college, right? It's kind of popping out there in this triangle. Actually, let me use a pointer.
That center button with the ball.
Oh, okay, there it is. So this is the college. Logan and pregnant on the So this is showing, I mean, look, we already knew the college has a significant amount of forest, and it's probably one of the greatest areas of absorbing stormwater and flooding that we have in the entire city. What then you understand here on the right, or you can walk through this with me, is rainwater captured with added tree canopy. So this is looking at those potential planting areas. And if you were to add tree canopy, where would that additional stormwater uptake be the greatest? So in the darkest orange or almost red colors, that's where you're going to get the greatest amount of stormwater uptake when you plant new trees. So that certainly helps the city with stormwater management, it helps neighbors with flooding issues. And this can help guide us if you have an interest in planting trees for water absorption, flood abatement, things like that. This helps guide us on where those spots would be. Even the college has some areas that, if you want to plant, would certainly absorb more stormwater. And then here on the right, I've got some facts that are specific to Brunswick, talking about the amount each year that the current canopy is absorbing for the city of Brunswick. This is the nitrogen and phosphorus and amount of sediment. And the volume of water we're looking at during a 10-year or 24-hour rain event, a 7-inch event, which that's a pretty substantial rain. It's not something we get every day, but every now and then. These trees take up almost 15 million gallons of runoff, which is about 23 Olympic-sized pools. That's that's pretty significant for a city the size of Brunswick. So now we're turning over to heat and how is the city forest able to help us during hotter summers. So the image on the left is kind of the temperature gradient for the city, looking at some of the, determining which are the hottest areas of the city. And then the image on the right is taking a couple of different data sets together. It's looking at those potential planting areas, so those open spaces in the city, which ones are the hottest, and which ones, it also includes median household income. So it's looking at where can you plant trees in lower income areas that actually help reduce heat. Those are the people that oftentimes could use that benefit most. So areas that would be the highest priority are in the dark red, so reasonable zones here, you see it here, would benefit lower income people by reducing heat. And I have again some stats here on the right. It's about 85 acres that are identified as the highest priority for planting. And each year, these trees remove significant amounts of carbon, ground level ozone, and particulate matter. So we talked about the benefits of the trees and the canopy. Now I'm going to talk about more of the threats of the existing canopy and what can be done. So this is looking at, we talked about sea level rise and that saltwater intrusion. And the image on the left there is showing the tree canopy that's at risk from sea level rise or the potential planting areas that are at risk of sea level rise. So where do we need to be worried about existing trees dying? Or if you were to plant some trees, make sure there's salt tolerant trees, because we have a great list here that we can pull from. So again, this just kind of helps us understand, what are those areas that we need to, that will be transitioning to potential ghost forest. And if we're going to be planting in these areas, what are the appropriate trees to be planting or replacing those dying trees with salt tolerant species?
Ashby, can you explain ghost forest?
Oh yeah, ghost forest. Does any students in here know ghost forest? Or any adults? So ghost forests are, you've probably seen these. We've gone up and down with 95. There's patches of them. Usually they're dead trees, usually in a marsh or an area that was previously freshwater tidal, but then the tides come in, salt water has come in, or if there's been a hydrological change, salt water has come in and killed those trees. So then they're usually just these white standing trunks that are stark against the background, and that community, that ecological community, has transitioned from one forest type to a marsh type or a different salt tolerant forest type. So storm surge. So this image on the left is showing what areas of the city are most vulnerable to a Cat 3 storm. The highest risk areas is about 376 acres. Yes, that is some salt water, but usually it's just a one-time pulse of salt water, and as long as there's rain or something afterwards, those trees can recover. One of the biggest worries with storm surge and hurricanes is really the wind factor and how much is going to get taken out. So a Cat 3 hurricane could bring up to 240,000 cubic yards of debris to the city of Brunswick, and so that's pretty significant for public works and others. So this helps us understand what trees may be getting that salt dose and would maybe be monitored to recover. And kind of linking to that a little bit, this is I find this to be an interesting data set. It's an urban tree risk index, and really it's looking at the streets in the city of Brunswick and looking at doing some modeling to understand which are the critical zones for critical facilities. So you've got a hospital, you've got fire stations, you've got police stations, you may have nursing homes, you may have other critical locations. And it can be a real problem if you have trees that are across roads after a storm that prevents entrance and exit to these facilities for a fire truck to get out or a police officer to get out. So this helps the city understand what are those pathways and streets we need to make sure we're monitoring more often. Maybe EMA can also use this information, Public Works. What are these streets that are going to be critical for monitoring the health of the trees to make sure that they're not falling on the road, blocking access, but also it's informational for those partners or organizations who are doing tree projects to consider wind-resistant trees location. You need to plant, not that anyone's doing this, you plant a bunch of pecan trees along I-17, like that's probably not going to go well the first storm that we get. But wind-resistant trees can help this become more of a wind-resistant community that can withstand hurricanes in the future a little bit better. And then, of course, there's inland flooding. So not all the flooding we have is saltwater. Sometimes we have that rainwater flooding and that freshwater flooding. So modeling after a 50-year storm or 13-inch rain over a 24-hour period, there's about 81 acres of tree canopy that are highest risk of extreme flooding, 19 acres of potential planting areas that are at risk of the same. During this storm, the city's tree canopy would capture about 19 million gallons of stormwater. And if the city were to lose 1% of its tree canopy, which it has lost 1% over the last 10 years, that generates an additional about 450,000 gallons of stormwater. So that's something that then the city has to deal with and manage and design around and all that sort of thing. But on the other side of it, if we're able to increase the tree canopy by 1%, that's about 50 acres again, then overall it would help mitigate 750,000 gallons of water. So it can be a significant assistance to the city. And it's important to understand, if you're going to be planting in these areas, what are those flood tolerant species that are going to do well? I think this is the last map, at least for you. Threats. This is looking at the existing tree canopy and how heat may be impacting those trees. So the pink and the red colors are going to be areas of town that are the hottest and where the trees might be impacted most from that heat. So of course we're getting heat in the summer and it's pretty rough. It might be increasingly a challenge in the future. And what I find interesting here is that a lot of it is actually focused in the very downtown portion of the city, Gloucester, Newcastle. Some of these reasons may be because there's a lot of concrete in this region. There's a little less trees in this region. And so it may be putting additional stress on those trees. So this is helpful for the city to understand, if things start to decline in this region, why that would be. Also, it helps inform if we're to plant new trees in this area, we need to be picking heat tolerant and drought tolerant trees so that they actually survive the next 50, 100 years in the future. So that was a lot about maps, and I love digging into those and nerding out on it. But also in the plan are a lot of interesting strategies that came up. A lot of these strategies came up as recommendations looking through those maps of what we've done. Some of the strategies came from the community survey and community workshops. And they kind of boil down to these categories. There's a lot more detail in the plan. And overall, these are kind of 5 main umbrella categories of strategies. And these are strategies to not just be taken by the city, but by partners, by major conservancy, by the public, by anyone who's interested in trees in the city of Brunswick. Those include updating the city policies to create more resilient green spaces, planting trees to increase resiliency within the city, educating the public on the importance of trees, because we can plant all the trees in the world, but people aren't taking care of them, don't want them, don't care about them. And that's only bringing more negative effects to the city and those trees. Increasing community tree stewardship, teaching people how to take care of them properly, how to plant them properly, where to put them properly, what species to plant. Develop stronger community partnerships to better manage the urban forest. So again, I said, we have about 30% tree canopy citywide, and the city decided that for a start, we're going to have a goal of maintaining the 30%, not losing anymore. But even maintaining the 30% takes effort. It's estimated that we lose roughly about 200 trees per year in the city of Brunswick. That could be a storm, plus dead trees that get taken out, plus someone moved in and wanted that oak gone from the driveway or whatever. So it's determined that that's 200 trees that we automatically lose every year. That means we have to plant 200 trees in the city just to maintain what we've got. So they estimated that's roughly about 160 trees on private property and about 40 trees on public property in the city limits. So we're doing some of that, probably not all of that. We do a tree giveaway with the tree board every year to city residents. The city does plant a handful of trees, but it's not really been, we haven't had these goals, clear goals yet until this year. So now we know what we must do with partners and the city. Of course, there was a lot of policy recommendations that we'll be digging into as well. One of our next steps in implementation is really to get with all our partners again and determine who's doing what and let's coordinate on this. You know, what is the city taking on? What is the tree board taking on? What is Gift taking on? What is People Around the Beautiful taking on? What pieces of this puzzle are each of us are taking in? And what's nice is that the city was able to hire a part-time arborist for the next 3 years. That's pretty significant. They got a grant, which is great. So they're able to start. The arborist certainly helps with people calling in about dead trees, or concerns for trees. They're also doing an inventory of the park trees, starting with those, and moving into other high priority areas to try to inventory that the city has already. So moving again into the implementation, one of the first, I guess, minor projects or plantings that we're going to try to do was identified in the plan that Brunswick Housing Authority would be a great partner, a potential great partner, as well as the school system. They own pretty significant portions of the city's property, and they have opportunities to plant trees, right? And some are great to work with students, the other is great to work with housing authority residents. So we, using all the data and maps, which I'd love to look at, we were able to identify this location here. This is Abbott Andrews Terrace. If you're familiar with that, if you come off actually it's not far from here. It's at the back of Tynova property. It's not there. And you usually you can't miss it. It's a pretty lacking tree housing authority property. It looks hotter than hell in the summer. You just think, oh my gosh, these people need some relief from this heat. So this is these 2 blocks here. There's the Tynova property. So you can tell tree canopy is 0 to 10%. It's probably some of the lowest in that area. That's the parcel information. It's here is showing that street right there has probably 0 trees, less than 5%. It's also here is showing you these are potential planting areas. That's the areas in between the housing buildings themselves. It's also showing you here. Again, it's a hot area of the city, likely because there's no trees. The few existing trees that are on site are probably getting super hot or will be getting super hot. And then this is also showing some of these hot planting areas. So that helps us understand what types of trees we need to be looking at. We probably need to be looking at those heat resistant, tolerant, heat tolerant, drought tolerant trees. And we're actually working with Brunswick Housing Authority and Tree Works, which is a local tree company, and hopefully the local residents to help understand what trees do they want to go in here and do a plan of those trees. So that's all I have. This is the tree board with me for the city of Brunswick, which really rallied behind this project to get it going and participated fully throughout the whole thing and been big champions. So kudos to them for working with me on this. Welcome, any questions? And the full plan is found at this website, nature.org, which is a Nature Conservancy's website, Brunswick Trees. So the full plan is there. It's a really interesting plan. It's about 80 pages. All those maps are there. All our detailed strategies and policy recommendations are there. I also brought a fact sheet for the tree plan, which is brand new. Feel free to grab that, and then a handful of our magazines too. If you want to
Super. Questions?
Yes. To other cities, when this is there's going to be an artist part-time. Yeah. Is that unusual? Like Brunswick doesn't have a tree arbors?
No, it's not unusual for smaller communities and low resource communities to not have an arborist. Certainly bigger cities do. It's they were able to hire Tree Works, which is a local tree company, who has certified arborists to do 10 hours a week of work for the next 3 years. So that's kind of a start. And I think Lynn County also hired Tree Works to also be part-time arborists for the county as well. So this company, has expertise and training and all of that to be able to provide those services. And what we're hoping, and I believe what will happen is the public works will do some shadowing of the certified arborists so that they can start to learn these important knowledge and skills. We have had some challenges with getting existing city staff interested in being trained as arborists. And there may be many reasons. I don't know, does it pay more? It's more time on them, all these things. It's at the end of their career, do they really want to do certification? So we're trying to push for at least some shadowing to happen to be able to transfer that knowledge to the actual city staff over time. So, or in time, if the city sees value in the fact that they have an arborist, maybe they'll actually fund it with their city budget forward.
Actually, do you have any ideas what's going to happen to develop the property as far as trees?
Oh, it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a great place to start an urban forest.
It does seem like a great place to do that. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know there's a lot of discussion of the redevelopment of that site, a lot of excitement around that.
Get some trees in there.
Yes, exactly. I hope that it'll be part of the plan. I would think whatever's going to go in there, it's pretty clear site, like anything that goes in there.
Right next to,
from trees.
it's right next to the hottest.
Exactly.
And so it'd be a good
That's a
place.
good idea. Maybe we should get more involved and be influential there. I know that it's been brought up with some of the land bank properties to potentially plant some trees on the land bank properties before they get handed over to the new owners, so that there are some trees there. And we have planted some trees on the FEMA lots. There's some FEMA buyout lots in the city, which just happens when a house gets flooded multiple times. The city and FEMA get together to buy that house, and people can move elsewhere to a less flood prone area. The house is demoed, and we have planted trees on those locations as well. So we've been finding little spaces here and there, but this helps provide a guide for all of us moving forward of where we need to focus. But I know it would be probably a good use for our that spot. Yeah.
I noticed there were some non-native trees on it, and maybe one invasive.
Yeah.
Fringe tree.
Yeah.
Is that a big problem? I mean, are those a big problem in some of the areas?
The non-natives.
Yeah.
That's a good question. So I know that there's a lot of, we tend to try to focus on natives, but because a lot of these spots are city focused, concreted area, sometimes some non-native, non-invasives will be presented as an option. We try to continue to push the native parts, but they are on the list. But I don't know of any. I don't know that we've planted many. There have been some French trees that were planted that are non-native, but I think it's because they thought they were getting the plants, and then they ended up ordering something different, and it was like in the ground before anyone realized. So a lot of lessons learned.
Speaking of trees, the number one tree you had was a bald cypress. I planted 3 bald cypress. They're now 45 years old.
Yeah.
But they're really a big problem
Oh,
because they have cypress knees that come up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're not friendly with lawnmowers.
I've seen where they have been a problem, and I've seen them like downtown Baton Rouge, and they weren't a problem. So I don't know if it's like the growing.
Was Baton Rouge paved and
It was.
all right?
Spending them for coming. Yeah, they were in these tree wells, like the metal grates and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh.
When developers
want to develop a site, and let's say there's, because we talked about site development,
Yeah.
who would be responsible for looking at what the tree coverage is current? Because there's often, I mean, from a planner, there's always the cut down and ask for forgiveness later.
Yes.
You know, rather than ask for permission, it's just ask for forgiveness. So is there, since there's limited arborists, is there oversight for these developers, or are they
Yeah,
just
that's,
gonna
it's a good
pay
question.
animal money?
Yeah, well, what's, so we only have a tree ordinance for public property in the city. So that's the right of ways, the city property. So if anyone wants to take down a tree that's in the right of way, you have to go to the city for that. Unfortunately, we don't have an ordinance for private property. Not yet. It has been discussed that, perhaps starting with one that's more focused on commercial, not like people's homes, but commercial development, you know, multi-use, you know, condos and that kind of thing, larger development. Maybe we need an ordinance for those, that type of property, and that would be a good place to start. That might be more palatable to the community to start with. So that's of interest to us. We would be able to have an influence there. Also, there is a, it's not perfect, but there's the Highway 17 overlay district, which is where JPs and, you know, Highway 17 as you approach St. Simon's, that has an overlay district that requires the site plan to be approved and certain trees to be kept on site and alive, of the historic trees and the percent of trees on the site. So that's why, I mean, I don't know whether the developer would have cleared it or not, but that's why you see some trees still over there. But the issue now has become, you know, there's like construction equipment on the roofs, you know, there's no buffer around that. So monitoring and making sure that there's tree care of the trees that they are going to preserve. And then, so. Yeah.
So so I imagine the acreage, right? If there were a goal to expand by another 1% or to replace 1%, and that's, I think you said that's like 50 acres, right? So that, I imagine you would measure that acreage in terms of canopy cover.
I think so.
And the canopy cover when you plant the, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 inch diameter tree isn't what it's gonna be. So there must be an element where you have to project out.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. Yeah, because you know, they say after so many years, you're gonna have the coverage, you know, that you aim for, but that's a good question.
Yeah.
We'll probably be finding things like that when we go to implementation.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Yeah.
What does this translate to? And there's a lot of details in the calculations of how they did this stuff, so we'll probably be going back to that and understanding it. Okay, what do they really mean about 50 acres? You know, it says that in 30 years it ends up being the whole acreage. Yeah.
What kind of, obviously they supported, the city council supported it, but did they have any kind of concerns that y'all had to talk through with them?
Yeah, I think, so one thing I found really interesting is when it was presented, when it was completed, we had presented to them several times during the process. One of the main concept or questions that came up, concerns, was when the city council person said, "I'm really scared of trees during storms." And first I thought, well, gosh, we did all this stuff, like, this is what you're bringing to me. But when I sat and thought about it, I thought that's it's a legitimate issue, especially with what this community has had for the last 10 years. So it's made me think of, you know, things like proactive maintenance of trees. A lot of low income people that cannot take care of their trees, don't have the money to spend $2,000, $3,000 on tree removal. And then programs that can help with that could potentially be really helpful for the city of Brunswick to remove dangerous trees and replant healthy, resilient trees in those spaces or those parcels. So it kind of got me thinking, okay, here's some potential projects, programs that somebody, not sure who, could take on and address some of those issues. It also points to education, like why are trees good and not always dangerous, but they can be dangerous if they're dead and in bad places. I also think when we presented it to them, we made a point to say, this is a guide. This is not like a requirement. This is a guide for the city and partners moving forward. We're not like, you know, pulling your feet to the fire to put X dollars right now towards this, but we do hope to build that and build the budget that's put towards trees over the years. And also, Commissioner Sadie brought this up and said, well, this helps us actually get more money for this because it's in the plan. We've identified these strategies. We can go after grants now to help fund these pieces, which is good. So I think those were some of the things that helped it be palatable and not so scary. Like we're, you know, shoving a plan down the throat with a bunch of requirements. It was more like, this is for all of us to move forward together. But
Ashby, do you have any recommendations for ways that students could get engaged in this work? Either, you know, while they're students, or what you guys mentioned individually, or maybe also as at the college, kind of through organizational action?
yeah. That's a really good question. I should have come more prepared with that answer. But I think, like I told Logan, there's a lot of aspects of this plan that includes the college. College is a very significant part of the city. So a lot of these strategies can be implemented here on campus, right? With plantings, with certain tree species, with heat areas, even if it's on campus or just around campus. So I would love it if the college kind of had ownership of its part of this on its property and kind of, you know, pick what strategies or regular policies or whatever kind of fit with the campus and maybe implement those over time. But otherwise, a lot of the other things could be, we have giveaways, we have Arbor Day every year, we have hopefully more plantings coming up that will certainly require volunteers and help, and education too. That's actually a big component that is lacking here. And hopefully things like Gift get up and running, which is still now Fund for Trees, which used to be pretty active and quiet. So there's lots of places there to plug in, and hopefully over time, it will be a more robust network of active partners working on this. I would love one day if we had something like a mini version of the Savannah Tree Foundation, but working here in Brunswick and Worley County. They're doing really awesome stuff in Savannah and doing tons of great work, great paintings, giveaways, education. When we get something like that here, I think it's just as important. So I think in time, hopefully more opportunities to plug in, but also feel free to contact the tree board. We always have.
To that point, I was like, say, this is an extremely beautiful thing. And one of the things is like just getting to work this classroom, you have to walk through the tree. It's like sometimes it's a journey, you know, to be under the field. And I think from a civil engineering standpoint, to the point fellow made here about this, you know, this, the vast, let's say, mass clearing and the clear cutting for development. From the experience I've had in civil engineering and architecture, that zoning ordinances and so forth, if you look at the Walmarts and all these mass excavated sites, they do not put back the appropriate number of trees. And everybody goes out and they want to find a parking place under a tree. Right?
Yeah.
So typically in other urban areas, they would have, you know, like every 10 spaces would be an island and there would be a tree.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not something we can resolve quickly in Brunswick, but I'm experienced in many cities. And also to the point of, you know, encouraging tree planting on Jekyll Island, you can adopt a tree or you can plant a tree, and it costs a little bit of money.
Yeah.
But the thing is like be dedicated to a family member or somebody else, and you know, you can do that around. You can do that around Brunswick too. And I'd just like to ask you, out of all the trees to be planted, because kind of like Audubon oriented.
Oh yeah, of course.
what trees would you suggest planting that have longevity, bear fruit, and bring the birds into this area?
Gosh, that's a good question. I don't know that I am the best to answer that. Sarah might be the better person to answer it. You know, there's a wide variety of trees. I think what we realized is everyone wants to plant live oaks, and they are nice, but we need more diversity across the board of trees. So I don't know that I have one particular tree, but I have an interest in seeing diversity of trees, of deciduous trees, those trees that lose their leaves, that have flowers, that have, you know, nuts, whatever, so that we have a variety of resources for wildlife. And it just looks better rather than being monotonous, you know, solid green all year long, no fall color kind of location. So I don't know that I have the best like wildlife, you know, tree recommendations, but diversity, I think.
DNR.
Yeah, I think orchids, yeah, oaks are pretty high on the list of supporting pollinators and caterpillars for birds in spring and the mast in the fall, and yeah, being evergreen. But I think black cherry might be the second highest after them.
Red mulberry has a lot of birds.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not trees, but shrubs.
Yeah, in terms of the tree stand.
And speaking to your point about like, you know, the parking lots and things like that, some of the policy recommendations were, you know, look back at the ordinances for zoning and things like that and alter them so they require tree wells and X trees per acre of, for, you know, whatever feet of parking lot. And actually the city is doing some really interesting stuff with green infrastructure. So things like pervious surfaces and things like that where trees can be part of that. And I know they're looking at the middle school and some, you know, potential future green infrastructure there that would include like redoing some parking lot and trees. So yeah, I think that especially through ordinances and law, you can really have a big impact by changing.
Do you, in your studies and review with other people, have you run across information that would tell you how efficient let's take a pine tree, you plant a loblolly pine tree and it gets bigger, 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 and it has actually probably some smaller ones. Does the efficiency of that large tree, does it decrease as it gets older, or does it increase in the water absorption? It might increase that, but it takes in less CO2. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you run across any of that? I don't expect you to have the answer, but when you were working with other people that knew something about trees, did they ever bring that up about efficiency and age?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Because a live oak, it seems as it gets bigger and bigger, it seems to be more efficient than a small one.
Yeah.
A pine tree, it doesn't